Hey, this is Lee Balcom. Welcome back to another video where we keep working on how you can get to a better place in your marriage, how to get to a better place in your relationship. And today we want to talk about what happens when you go from pause button to panic button, because that's often what happens. And unfortunately, that doesn't help things. It makes things worse. So first of all, let's backtrack a little bit. If you're not familiar with my theory that most marriages first get into trouble because you hit the pause button. So what is the pause button? The pause button is what you hit when you decide you gotta go back to life after all of this love stuff. Now, you've gotten married, everything is kind of locked in. And I've heard this so many times. In fact, I was at a wedding one time where the bride was like, okay, well, now we're married. I can do whatever I want. And, life goes on because now I have him. That was what she said. Well, that's not the way it works. So unfortunately, many of us fall into this trap. So the pause button is what happens. That's what you hit, thinking to yourself, and I really think that people believe this, that they are going to get back to the marriage at some point, X point in the future. So the X point may be after the kids are, let's start with after kids, right? We'll unpause after kids, after they get out of diapers, after they are in daycare, after, they're in school, after, they're in high school, after they're in college, after they're out of college, after we've helped with their kids, on and on it goes. Like, we will get back to us, right? We will get back to dealing with our relationship then. I think it's well-meaning. There's a problem to that particular approach, though, right? So it may be it's about a job, right? I've got to get to this level of income. I've got to get to this promotion. I've got to make partner. I've got to whatever, fill in the blank. Or I've got to complete this many marathons or triathlons or play in this many golf tournaments or tennis tournaments or travel the world with my friends or see my friends. And there's something, right? There's something that you go, we will get back to us when we're retired. We'll get back to us when the kids are older. We'll get back to us after we've done all these fun things. And unfortunately, that's not the way life works. When you hit pause on a relationship, you do not go into suspended animation. That's the myth. You don't go into suspended animation. You begin to starve the relationship of the one thing that it desperately needs: connection. So instead of it being suspended animation, it is actually very slowly withering away. Right? It's shrinking away and losing its power, losing its energy. You think you put it in suspended animation, and really you're starving the relationship. But sometimes that doesn't show up for a while. When it does, it shows up because somebody says, enough's enough. I can't do this. I don't feel the love anymore. I don't feel connected to you. I don't feel in love with you anymore. I love you, but I'm not in love with you. You're the parent of my child, and all those other phrases that we often hear. All of that means our connection is so ruptured, I don't know what to do about it. I don't know if we can get back to it. So that's what is kind of behind the pause button. And so you get awakened because somebody says something about that. Somebody finally goes, I can't keep doing this. And so they have taken their hand off the pause button. And now they're going, I think I want separation, divorce, need my space, I don't love you anymore, don't know what to do. I mean, there are lots of ways that people describe that. And in your head, suddenly we go from pause button to panic button. Panic is not a great way of dealing with many things in life. We get that many times. When there is an emergency, we go into panic mode. That doesn't mean it's particularly helpful because, as has been said in many places, the difference between our reacting and how we respond is significant. So as one way to think about that is when you are in panic mode, you do panic and pummel, which is really where you are doing whatever you can to get back to that, what you want, right? Any amount of arguing or cajoling or making them feel guilty or whatever. That's the pummel part. The panic part is that fight, flight kind of, I'm going everywhere, trying to figure out what to do. Not particularly effective. So what can you do? I'm going to give you another 4. Instead of panic and pummel, let me give you another 4 P's that might help you. And that is to pause, process, plan, proceed. Process that we want to recommend here. And so how do you do that? Well, this has been discussed in different places, and one of the places that it gets discussed all the time is in kind of military or first aid settings. At first responder kind of places is the same kind of approach. The first thing you want to do whenever you're thrown into a crisis situation is pause. I remember this from all of my training in first aid when I was doing my training as a dive instructor. So one of the things that they first said is assess the scene. Pause for a minute. Don't rush in, right? And I remember when I was taking the course in this, it was, I think March, when I was in northern Indiana, where it's cold, and we were diving in a quarry, and I was in this very thick wetsuit where I was waiting in this little building for them to let us know that an accident had happened that we needed to go deal with. And the accident happened was there was a diver who was underwater and unconscious. We had to locate them, decide what to do underwater with our partner, get them to the surface, and get them to first aid. So daunting task, right? And so I remember the butterflies in my stomach and all of that. And so we rush in when they call us, and we put on all our stuff because it's like we had been out of water. We'd already done our dive, and now it was time to get back in and go deal with it. So we go down, and our immediate thing is to pause for a minute and make sure there's nothing in the way. This is what you do when you're on any first aid scene, right? You want to make sure that you're not going to make things worse by adding yourself to the incident or endangering the person who is in the incident, right? So you're going to look, are there, for instance, wires around that might shock you, or something that you might dislodge, or something that might happen to you, right? That's the first thing. Pause. And the pause is important because you've got to let the adrenaline that's hitting you calm down just a little bit. So pause. Second thing is to process. Process in this context is to ask the question, how am I feeling? What is my emotional state? Because one of the things that we know from research is being able to name an emotion helps us to deal with the emotion. So we sit there and process for a minute. Oh gosh, I'm scared to death, right? This frightens me. I'm so sad about where we are. I'm disappointed in myself. All of those emotions, you're trying to process them and be able to name them and be able to kind of move beyond them. Because the next step is to plan. What are you going to do? What is your plan to rebuild the relationship? When you focus on mine, my plan has 3 areas. Connect with your spouse, change yourself, create a new path. So connect, change, create. That's my kind of way I understand that. So you're building out your plan at this point, and I mean build out your plan. Figure out what you're going to do. So plan. And the last thing you do is proceed. You don't proceed. You don't jump into the mix until you've taken a chance to pause, to figure out how you feel and to process it, to create your plan, and then to move forward. Now, that's instead of the panic and pummel. It's not about hitting the panic button. It's taking your hand off the panic button, but you can't just leave it on pause. We've got to get you somewhere different. If you need help with that, please check me out online. I got a couple of resources I want to tell you about. One is I have a Substack. The Substack you can find at theconnectioncompass.online. theconnectioncompass.online. That will be a resource to help you find some articles and some trainings and some help to do that. All you have to do to subscribe is drop in your email and you're up and running. The other is my Save the Marriage system. You can find that by going to savethemarriage.com. That's savethemarriage.com. You need some help to make sure you've got that plan in place so that you can safely proceed. This is Lee Balcom wishing you the best as you work to save your marriage.